All right, you guys. In this video, there are some very important things to recognize. Stay tuned to the end. You're going to see the most effective way that I recommend to add the two verses. There are a number of ways to do it, but watch one of the last ways we show is going to be my recommendation. And it's a mix between having time ahead, but also being able to do it on the fly. But it simplifies the process really nice. All right, enjoy. What's going on, everybody? This is Gary B. Jr., your media consultant. Today, we're going to be talking about how to add multiple verses to one slide in FreeShow. So, someone recently asked, how do you add two verses on one slide in FreeShow? And I'm going to show you a couple of things to consider when trying to do this and a couple of ways to do it, obviously. So first thing you can do is I've got a slide here or a slideshow here with Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 18. All right. So you can see here it's got 1, it's got verse 2, and so forth and so on. So if I want to, if I had plenty of time to prepare, I can just go up here and I can edit this, and I could say, I want to select these two verses on here, and let's hold down control or command in this case, and that one, and I can right click and I can go to format and say merge. Okay. And you'll see that it shows 2 and 1 because I selected verse 2 first. And then I held down and held down command and did that. Now you would have to format this and take this out and correct that, and it'll be good to go. And then you can have that there. If we did it better, let's do it to where it's actually correct. So if we hold down command, you'll see it light up white, and then I'll select that one, right click, and I can go to format and I can go to merge. All right. Two verses, verses 4 and verse 5. And then you would just remove this here, and you'll have that particular slide with verses 4 and 5 together. All right. So it'll look like that. Now, if you don't want to do that, or maybe you're just pulling up the verses on the fly, okay, here's another way to do it that allows you to do it real time. All right. So right now, this is Genesis. All right. So I can actually go down here and I can double click a verse and it'll show up just that one verse. All right. But once you double click a verse, you can hold down shift. All right. So I can go to verse 3, and I can go and select verse 4, and you'll see that it's added when I held down shift. I can go hold down shift and select verse 5, and you'll see all 3 verses now showing up. All right. And so that's another way that you can make this work. Now, if I was not inside, so if I go down here and or up here, I should say, to the slideshow, when you select a single verse here, it does not change what shows up in the preview. All right. So I'm in Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. And maybe you want to put those 2 verses up pretty quick at the same time. That's when you can hold down command on verse 9 and then go to verse 10, and you'll see the preview showing 9 and 10. Just hit the play button down at the bottom, and they both will show up on your screen for your audience. Now, this is a great way to get those verses up very quickly. Holding down the command on a Apple device and or control on a Windows device, and you can get those going. Now, once you do that and you want to go to your next verse, the challenge is going to be to try to get both verses in at the same time, because it will change real time. Is going to be to hold down command and get them to both show up at the same time. All right. And then you can hit enter and it should make them come up, or you can hit reset down here at the bottom and it'll make them come up. Now notice what ends up happening. I've got verses 11 and 12, both verses. This is one of the things you got to look out for when you're trying to put 2 verses in at the same time, is that this particular template is called big with no box. All right. So if I go to my scripture templates and we look at the big with no box, big no box is here. All right. That's what's selected. If I go to edit, you can look and you'll notice that I don't have auto size on for this particular template. When I turn it on and we go back, let's open up our scriptures again. And that pops up and I select refresh. Notice now that the scriptures all fit. If you don't have your auto size on, what will happen is you run a greater risk of your scriptures running over to where they're getting cut off if you don't use auto size. Now, auto size is something that is a mixed review. Some people like it because of this very reason, that they can have long verses and they don't have to worry about the verse running over. And it comes in handy in clutch situations when you don't have a lot of time ahead. So when you're doing on the fly changes real time, then auto size is great. Some people don't like it because it changes the size of your text from one verse to the next. And in those cases, there's a lot of time that you have to prepare to actually adjust your slides one by one, right? And if that's the case, then you would do that. However, if you're going to be doing 2 verses at a time, this is the best way to do it on the fly. And then if you want to do them individually, or in terms of you got plenty of time, you can just select a batch of verses, hold down Command or Shift and select the verse that you want last. So I've got verses 1 through 10. I can right click and I can just select an option that says Convert to Show. All right. And it gives you an option. It says max verses per slide. I can go to 2 and I can say split reference. We can turn that on. And then reference on first slide, we can keep that off, and I can say convert to show. And now you got verses 1 and 2, and there's the reference, verses 1 and 2. I can arrow to the right. You'll see verses 3 and 4, verses 5 and 6. All right. That would be the quickest way to do this if you have time to create it into a show. All right. And the simplest way, as opposed to having a show with individual verses and then trying to merge those verses together, because there's going to be some editing needed. Next to doing it on the fly, where you have to be careful of not selecting one and then holding down the command to get the next one up, and then you can hit the play button down below. It'll make it show up. But when you try to do that same thing again, what ends up happening is you start adding verses. If I hold down command, it just adds more verses to it. And we don't want to do that. So it's not going to be as invisible or seamless to your audience to be able to get those next 2 verses up, because you've activated the scripture boxes or scripture drawer at the bottom. All right. So my recommendation is to highlight the verses you want by selecting the first verse, holding shift, and then select the last verse you want. We'll go to 26. You'll notice that the preview looks kind of crazy, but you can right click, select convert to show, and then max verses per slide. Make it 2, you can make it 3, whatever you want, and then select split reference so to actually show what the reference is of those particular verses on that particular slide. So if it's 3 verses or 2 verses, I say, you'll see verses 6 and 7 down at the reference on this slide. On your next slide, you'll see reference 8 and 9 on the next slide. All right. And so when you do that, you select convert to show. Now, with all that being said, the thing you got to make sure of, as I said before, is whatever template you're using. If you go to your templates right now, the template we've got for this is the big no box. It's this one here. When I select that, you'll notice that it changes actually, and you'll see it goes, and these are centered now for the verses, and they're there, but I've got it set to where it's going to auto fill the text. If you can go to edit by right clicking on that, you can confirm and you'll make sure your auto size is set up. If it's not set up, and I turn this off, all right, and we refresh, some of these could run into that. I've got the text box big enough to where you don't have anything running over, which is good. So yeah, that's the thing to look for. Make sure you have auto fill set up, or auto size, and or if you've got plenty of time, make sure you have time to edit the size of those particular scriptures from the edit page up here, and you can make sure that each one is there. You can get a preview on the left side to make sure nothing's running over. And if it is, you can select all those and then change the font size from the right side. All right. One special note about this process when it comes to adding multiple verses on one line. Here's something to understand as well. In your settings under scripture, there's an option down here that says verses on individual lines. Now, in my examples, you'll see the verse numbers are on the left and they're kind of all aligned to where you see 16, 17, 18. But if we say verses on individual lines and we deactivate or disable that, you'll notice that it kind of goes into this paragraph form, and now all of your verses are together. This is an option to consider if you want your verses to look seamless and not broken up or separated. That's definitely an option. I personally prefer the verses on individual lines because it makes it easier for the audience to kind of follow along, but it's totally up to you as to how you manage that part of the process, along with any of the other options that you have down here. You can turn verse numbers completely off if you want to. And you can just play with these settings down in FreeShow because there's a lot of cool options here as well. All right. Just wanted to make sure we did not forget that. Thanks. Now, hopefully that makes sense on how to show more than one verse at the same time. Now, note this is very different than showing two versions of the Bible at the same time. This is literally just showing more than one scripture at a time from the same Bible. All right. Hopefully this makes sense, and I look forward to talking with you next time. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope it helped you in a major way. Now, at this point, most people would ask you to like and subscribe, and I think that's great, but my goal is a little bit different. My goal is to empower as many people as possible all over the globe. And there's one way that you can really help me do that, and that is to leave a comment below with a question, a thought, how this video may have helped you, or things that were left out that you still have questions about, and to share this video with someone just like you, someone who is looking for answers, someone who's curious and wants to grow. With your help, I believe we can build a community of people that want to grow together. So until next time, God bless.